Welcome to another episode of English Speaking Made Easy, your guide to good English. We're going to begin today's episode with the Grammar Express. If you remember, in the previous episode we had dealt with one aspect of the tense, which was a simple present tense. So in this episode we are going to bring before you another tense type, which is the present progressive tense or the present continuous tense. Okay. The funny thing is, this particular tense is the one which is overused by most non-native English speakers. Especially they use a lot of present continuous tense in areas where the simple present tense should be used. Now let's try to understand in what contexts and what contexts only the present progressive tense should be used. Okay. First we use the present progressive tense to describe an action which is in progress. The action is not complete. It's an incomplete action which is happening at the moment when we are speaking. And we usually use some time expressions there. We use words like at the moment, right now. Okay, we use these kind of expressions too. So we look at an example as to how we use a present progressive tense. We are discussing the project at the moment. You see that? Okay, either you are making a phone call or you are having a group chat and you are discussing this project. So sentence comes in as we are discussing the project at the moment. So just apply the rule we described before. This is an action, it is not over, it is still in progress. Along with that, this is an action which is happening at the time of speaking. So that's the first rule for the present progressive tense. Okay, and if you look at how it is formed, unlike the simple present tense, the progressive tense is formed by a subject. If you look at the example we gave before, we are discussing the project at the moment. So we is the subject, and in a present progressive tense we have to use the auxiliaries is, are or was or were, depending on a past or a present scenario we are referring to. So we have to use an auxiliary, then we use the verb, and the verb has an ing form. We are discussing. So we have ing added on to the word discuss, and then we have the predicate, the object. We are discussing the project at the moment. So that's how it is formed. So here we have the addition of an auxiliary and we also have the addition of an ing form to the verb. Now let's go on to the next use of a present progressive tense. The next use is when you want to speak about some future arrangement, something which is happening, let's say in the near future. A plan or an arrangement that you've made which is going to happen in the near future. We use it with time expressions like tonight, tomorrow, perhaps this week or this Monday, and you can have examples which will make it clear for you. The first sentence is Jim is leaving for Brussels this evening. That's one example of how we use the present progressive tense to express something which happens in the near future. Okay, that's the second use of the present progressive tense. The third use is to speak about things that are repeated regularly. It happens regularly, and when you want to give it a slight bit of a negative meaning, you more or less it's like expressing your frustration at something negative which happens quite regularly. And for that also we generally use these time expressions like forever or always with that. Now this is another kind, so just pay attention to how that particular sentence is framed with this rule in mind. The sentence is her husband is always complaining about his health. It doesn't mean he's perhaps complaining right now, but that's his normal thing. Her husband is always complaining about his health. So we know that when we hear that, she's not very happy about it. Her husband is always complaining about his health. So here it is more or less like a negative thing which is used using a time expression like always. Now is a very, very important part which distinguishes the present progressive tense from the simple present tense, and this mistake we are all guilty of making at some point. See, one mistake that we do is when we are speaking about a company, what it sells, or we are speaking about what it produces, we generally, it's something they do on a regular basis. So it would not be ideal to use a present progressive tense in such a context. We would need to use a present simple tense. That's because it's something the company makes at a very regular, it's a regular thing the company does. Now, for example, I'll give you an example that will make that particular area of confusion clear for you. See, if you're going to say, you're speaking about your company perhaps, okay, and you're saying, we are producing high-end plastic pipes. If you look at it, it doesn't really seem like a wrong sentence. But in reality, that sentence is wrong because when you say we are producing high-end plastic pipes, it almost looks like it's not a temporary activity, it's something you do all the time. Let's look at the correct version of it. Instead of saying we are producing high-end plastic pipes, we need to say we produce high-end plastic pipes. It looks like a very small error, but in terms of how it is used, the context is wrong. Okay, so we are producing is wrong because it's a regular thing the company does. So you need to drop the present progressive tense there and use the simple present tense. We produce high-end plastic pipes. That is one area which kind of often confuses people. So just remember, when something is done regularly by a company, ideally use a simple present and not a present progressive form. Another error which comes in is when we hear students give their self introduction. This is a repeated error we see. When they speak about their hometown, most of them say, I am coming from Kollam or I am coming from Trivandrum. That same rule pertains to the rule I told you right now. The where you are coming from or where you are from, it's not something that is likely to change. It's something that is a proper regular thing there. So when you have an expression like that, instead of saying I am coming from Kollam or I am coming from Trivandrum, it is ideal to say I am from Trivandrum. I come from Trivandrum. You don't need to use an ing form, okay, because that's a static thing, that's your hometown. The same rule applies here too. So just pay attention to that little bit of a thing. Now, when I've spoken to you how you form the present continuous tense, okay, so here also the subject, the number of the subject will have an impact on the auxiliary that you use. For example, I am writing a poem. Perfect, because I am writing a poem. But if I say we, the am changes to we are writing a poem. Or if I say he and she is writing a poem, they are writing a poem. That slight bit of thing you need to remember, how the subject will have an impact on the number of the subject, will have an impact on whether you're going to use the auxiliaries is or are. That's a very simple rule. Just brought it in to give you the just to give you the form going in there. Now, even the simple progressive, the present progressive tense also can be formed using a negative. You just need to add a not there. I am sleeping. I am not sleeping. She is writing. She is not writing. Okay, you just add a not and that becomes the negative form. Similarly, you want to put that into a question. She is writing. If you want to put it into a question form, a yes no question form, you would say, is she writing? Okay, you would ask, is she writing? And you put a question mark there. They are watching the movie. You put the auxiliary first. You say, are they watching a movie? You get the answer yes or no. So the little bit of thing that you do when you want to convert a present progressive tense into a question is, you take the auxiliary, the is or the are, which is used there, you bring it first and then you bring the subject in. Okay, and then your question is done. Okay, so you can also ask present continuous questions or present progressive questions with the WH words. What are you doing? Where are you going? How are you going to speak? So you can use that even with WH questions. Okay, so I guess that's a simple part, and the present progressive tense is the one of the simplest tenses most people do not find. It's easy for them to kind of learn that and understand where it is, except for a few errors which I've pointed out now. I'm sure you're all good to go with how to use the present progressive tense. Now we are moving on to our next section, which is Lexica, your guide to good vocabulary. Today I have chosen a few words related to a very common thing that we see around us, newspapers. But just look at the words I'm going to tell you and see if you've heard them before, and if you've not, then you'll know how to recognize what those words really mean. So the umbrella topic is newspapers. In English, we use two different names for newspapers. One we call broadsheets. Broadsheets are the mainstream newspapers which deal with serious content, which means they are bigger in size, they are broader. As the name suggests, they are broader in size and they deal with serious content. Now that you will understand why it is given that particular name when you see the name we give for newspapers which deal primarily with celebrity gossip. They are not like broadsheets. Broadsheets deal with serious content, perhaps serious political content or serious sports. It's all that way, international news and all that. On the other hand, there's another kind of newspaper which deals with celebrity gossip, what film stars do, what parties they go, what the socialites do. That kind of a newspaper is very popular and they are called tabloids. Tabloids. Okay, they are the opposite of broadsheets in terms of what kind of content they have. So we have broadsheets and we have tabloids. Tabloids are full of gossip and they make lots of nice pictures and they make for a very good read. Now there are some newspapers which they're called the gutter press. Gutter itself in English means kind of a pipeline where dirty water flows. So that's exactly how that word is also put into. It's called gutter press. Now gutter press is the kind of newspaper that has a lot of sensational journalism. They focus on all those slimy details about the lives of famous people, and because it's not exactly serious content, they mainly have articles which shame or in some way have something negative, some kind of celebrity gossip and all comes in. It's often a very negative light because the term itself suggests it like gutter press. It means something which is almost like waste. Gutter itself is wastewater flowing through. So gutter press refers to all those sleazy stories that some newspapers cover of celebrities. Okay, so we've had broadsheets, tabloids. Another expression I brought in was the gutter press. When you take a newspaper, I'll just quickly go through this because this could be a simpler bit. When you take a newspaper's content, what it has, you will notice that newspapers have headlines. That's what we look out for when we first take the newspaper. If someone dies, the news of their death, it's called an obituary. It has a small picture of them perhaps, and it will have the details about them. It's called an obituary. Then you have the editorial. The editorial is one of the most interesting parts of every newspaper, wherein the editor puts in his views on certain topical issues of interest today. So it's a more detailed form of an analysis of a current affairs, something that is very, very relevant at that point of time. That's called the editorial section. And then we have that wonderful bit where you have cartoons. We call them the comic strips. That's the comic strips which come in newspapers. Then of course newspapers have information on weather, horoscopes and businesses and everything. And it also has a lot of international news. Okay. Other related vocabulary related to newspapers or how we use them is every newspaper, when how popular it is based on the extent of its circulation. If a newspaper has a good circulation, it is much more popular than the others. Another expression related to newspapers is the word paparazzi. Paparazzi refers to those celebrity photographers who hound celebrities to get pictures of them, and they are very annoying most of the time. You see them anywhere there's a celebrity or a film star out, you will see 1,000 paparazzi clicking away photos. They're called paparazzi. Okay, how the newspaper is laid out, how the columns and all, that's called the layout. And sometimes the layout has a very strong impact on how we enjoy reading the paper. Some newspapers have very interesting headlines or captions. We say it is eye-catching. They might include some very stimulating pictures, or they may have catchy captions, or the layout could be interesting. So we call it very eye-catching. Okay? When a newspaper reaches us, before it reaches us, there's someone who makes sure there are no errors in the newspaper. That process is called proofreading. Proofreading is used for every kind of printed material to make sure there are no errors. If you want a newspaper which is an old edition one, then we refer to it as a back issue. Can I have a back issue of the Hindu, I think dated 29th October 2002. That's a back issue. Okay, so that's the word we refer to that. So you've seen a lot of words. I've shared words about the kinds of newspapers we have. We spoke about tabloids, about gutter press, about broadsheets, went on to speak about the contents in the newspaper, and also about words like circulation, many more related words to how a newspaper functions. Okay, so I hope that's kind of equipped you with good vocabulary relating to how you can speak about these publications. Now let's move on to our third section. Say it right, your guide to good pronunciation. Today I am kind of continuing with what I had done in the previous episode, that is giving you a little bit more of perhaps not such common words, but words which we generally hear, words which are still taken in from the language French. So the first word is B-O-N-A-P-P-E-T-I-T. You may have heard this word, and when you hear this word, it's like you must have heard this word bon voyage. And you know, when someone goes off on a journey, we say bon voyage, have a great journey. So this word also is quite similar to that, say bon appetit. And appetit itself comes from the word appetite as we use it in English. So we know it has something to do with what we eat. That's how we understand. So you have someone, you've served a wonderful meal, you want to tell them enjoy your meal. You say bon appetit. Okay, and it's very commonly used. And that so that's how that word bon appetit, that's how that word is pronounced. Generally most people do pronounce the T, but sometimes at the end of that expression bon appetit, but it is also sometimes kept as silent, but it's okay, bon appetit. That's how we say that first word. The next word that we have is the word forte. Now forte is also a word which is taken from French, and it is so commonly used that it's kind of good to know what it means. Now forte basically means something that you are good at, an area that you are good at. If I say speaking is my forte or English is my forte, it basically means that is what I am good at. So F-O-R-T-E is not fort, it is forte. The E comes in, and that word's pronunciation is like this because it's a loan word from French. Okay, forte. Now the next word which you could perhaps which you would find interesting is the word G-E-N-R-E. If you actually see, this word is so overused, everybody uses it because the meaning itself is very common. It means a type, a kind. But you will see that even when we grew up, even when I was in school and college, I had every teacher having her own take or his own take on how this word was pronounced. So you will find different alternative pronunciations. Some of them say Jenna, some will say Jonna. So it's very, very different how it's pronounced. But the word is a French word, and the French have a slight aspirational sound coming. It's genre, genre, genre. Okay, so that's how that word is pronounced. It's not Jonna or Jenna. It is genre. And the pronunciation is different because it is a word from French. So you can't just take in the letters and coin your own pronunciation. That would not be right. And it's good to know how this word is pronounced correctly, because it's a very commonly used word in both in writing and speaking. And so you want to speak about a movie, a kind of book. You say this comes under the genre of let's say science fiction. So that's how we kind of use that word, genre. The next word we are going to use is the word sans. Now sans pronunciation is quite obvious, nothing much of confusion there, but that's also a French word, and it's nice to know what we use it for. This word means without. I like her sans makeup. So that means I like her without makeup. I like her sans makeup. Pronunciation, of course, for this word is clear and simple, and it's another interesting French word which we use. Now the next word, N-I-C-H-E. In French it is pronounced niche, but in many English speakers also sometimes pronounce it as niche. Niche is the right French pronunciation, but some people also pronounce it as niche. Now this word is very similar to the word forte in terms of meaning. The actual meaning of niche is like a small cavity in the wall. There's a small niche. I put my hand into a niche. It's like a small cavity in the wall. But it also means something when you refer to like a niche market. It means a market which is primarily targeted at a particular kind of goods. It's a niche market. Okay, it means it's targeted at something very, very particular. So you say she has a very she sells this to a niche audience of plus sized people. When it's targeted a special category, we refer to something as being niche. And the last word is very interesting. Even when you say that word, it's often said very dramatically. It's voila. It basically means when it's an exclamation. When you say, oh wow, wonderful, you say voila, and it's got V-O-I-L-A. It's just the same way as you say wow and all. The French word for that is voila. Okay, so that's how that word is pronounced. So these are all different words, and I'm sure most of these words you might have seen or you might have heard people use them in movies and all that. So next time just pick your ears a little more. See here, if you make sure you hear these words, so that it will bring you that reference back to what I told you today, and you can also use them when you want to add a lot of drama to your speaking. Okay, now moving on to our last section, which is Let's Talk, your guide to good conversation. So this time I have a small conversation between two people, and they are speaking about the neighborhood, the area they live in. So you just look at the kind of words they've used and the context when you want to speak about the place you're living in. It doesn't have negative context. Okay, a person is not very happy about the kind of area he's living in. So as usual, we have two speakers, A and B. A starts off. He says, the house I live in is really run down. Run down means it's not maintained at all. It's almost on the verge of, its paint is gone, the plumbing is bad, it's run down, it's not maintained well. The house I live in is really run down, and the neighborhood isn't too great either, which means and the neighborhood isn't good too. So he's complaining about the house that he's staying in. So his friend tells him, then why don't you move to a better locality, or why don't you move to a better area? And he says, well, you know how high the rents are, and I'm not too sure I can afford it right now. So because he can't afford it, so then his friend gives him a solution. Then perhaps you should move in with your parents until you find a suitable place. Okay, then perhaps, look at how he gives an alternative. Then perhaps you should see the use of the word perhaps there. Then perhaps I think you should move in with your parents until you find a suitable place. And he says, I've talked to the landlord regarding the maintenance. Let me just see how he responds. If nothing comes of it, I guess I will have no other option but to move out. So he says, I've spoken to the landlord. If something happens, good. If not, I will have no other option but to move out. So that's a small conversation regarding an unpleasant staying option a friend has. Okay, so on this note, we're coming to an end of the program. We hope to see you next time again with a lot more information on how to improve your English speaking. Thank you.